A cartoon family predicted a president before he ran. They called a $71 billion corporate merger a decade early. They put a tiger attack on screen before it happened to the two most famous tiger tamers on the planet. And buried in a random 1997 soccer episode, they may have just called the 2026 World Cup final. This isn't clickbait nostalgia. This is a 35-year pattern that keeps getting stranger. And today we're ranking the 8 creepiest coincidences The Simpsons ever put on screen, counting down to the one that's unfolding on your TV right now. Stick around, because the last one connects directly to a match that could be played in a few weeks. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it either. 8. The president nobody saw coming. Back in March 2000, Lisa Simpson sat behind the Resolute desk as President of the United States. Her country was broke, her advisors were panicking, and she dropped one line almost as a throwaway joke. The nation had inherited a massive budget mess from President Trump. Remember what Donald Trump actually was in the year 2000. Not a politician, not a nominee, not even a serious rumor in Washington. He was a tabloid fixture, real estate, casinos, a rotating cast of magazine covers, the kind of guy people associated with gold-plated lobbies, not the Oval Office. Sure, he'd floated a reform party run the year before, but almost nobody treated it as anything more than a publicity stunt. The Simpsons writers weren't fortune tellers. They were watching a culture where celebrity was starting to blur into political power, and they pushed that idea to its most absurd possible conclusion for a laugh. Then in 2016, the joke walked off the screen and into real life. Written off early as a sideshow candidate, Trump outlasted a field of career politicians, dominated headline after headline, survived scandal after scandal, and beat Hillary Clinton to become the 45th president. The moment that happened, a 16-year-old punchline stopped being funny and started being unsettling. 7. The deal nobody believed could happen. The episode is When You Dish Upon a Star. Homer stumbles into Hollywood after a chance meeting with Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger, and near the end of the episode the camera lands on the Fox studio lot sign. Sitting right there in the background, with zero fanfare, zero dialogue calling attention to it, 20th Century Fox, a division of Walt Disney Company. Nobody in the writer's room treated this like a bold prediction. At the time, it was a punchline built on the impossibility of the idea. Disney was squeaky clean family entertainment. Princesses, parks, protected image. Fox was the loud, rebellious network that let The Simpsons itself mock corporations, politicians, and celebrities every single week. The joke worked because it sounded insane. Even Fox, home of the show, taking these jabs, getting swallowed by the most sanitized brand in Hollywood? 21 years later, in 2019, Disney closed a roughly $71.3 billion acquisition of the core 21st Century Fox assets. The film studio, FX, National Geographic, a bigger stake in Hulu, the works. A sign that was written as a punchline became a filing with the SEC. 6. The Tiger Act that turned real. In 1993, Springfield opens a casino, and the show rolls out 2 glitzy stage performers named Gunther and Ernst. Practically a wink-wink stand-in for Siegfried and Roy, right down to the sequins, the lights, and the white tiger sharing the stage. During the performance, the tiger turns on its handlers. It's played as dark slapstick, flashy showmen forgetting they're standing next to an apex predator. A decade later, it wasn't a joke anymore. In 2003, during a live performance at the Mirage in Las Vegas, one of Siegfried and Roy's own white tigers attacked Roy Horn on stage, dragging him off in front of a horrified crowd. He survived, but the injuries ended one of the most famous stage acts in Vegas history and changed the trajectory of his life. 5. The detail nobody wanted to notice again. 1997's The City of New York versus Homer Simpson is a goofy premise on paper. Homer has to retrieve his car after Barney abandons it near the World Trade Center, and the whole episode is just Homer being furious and hungry in Manhattan. Harmless, except for one freeze-frame moment. Lisa holds up a travel brochure advertising a trip to New York for $9. The number 9 printed huge, sitting right next to an illustration of the Twin Towers. Nobody thought twice about that image for 4 years. After September 11th, 2001, people went back and saw a 9 next to 2 towers and couldn't shake the resemblance to the date itself. The episode became so uncomfortable that it quietly disappeared from rotation for years, and when it did resurface, networks handled it carefully. A skyline that used to just mean New York had become something else entirely. 4. The corruption scandal written a year early. In You Don't Have to Live Like a Referee, Homer's one moment of accidental honesty somehow lands him a referee gig at the World Cup in Brazil. The episode plays it for laughs at first, donut guy Homer on the world's biggest stage, and then pivots hard. A fictional football federation official calmly admits, on camera, that the entire organization runs on bribery. Then he gets arrested. At the time it read as an obvious jab. Everyone already suspected the money behind international football wasn't clean. Then, in May 2015, it stopped being a joke. US and Swiss authorities unveiled a sprawling corruption case against FIFA, with officials rounded up in a Zurich hotel right before the organization's own Congress. 14 people were charged with racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering conspiracies tied to more than $150 million in bribes and kickbacks. FIFA's president wasn't arrested that day, but the walls closed in fast. He won re-election days later, then abruptly resigned under the weight of the scandal. 3. Brazil's Nightmare, scripted a year in advance. That same episode buried an even more brutal detail, a fictional match between Brazil and Germany, with Germany winning 2-0, a throwaway score in a cartoon. Then came the real 2014 World Cup semi-final, hosted in Brazil, against Brazil, with the entire country watching. Germany didn't win 2-0. They won 7-1. Miroslav Klose became football's all-time World Cup scorer. Toni Kroos scored twice in barely a minute. And by the half-hour mark, Brazil was already down 5 goals in their own backyard, missing suspended captain Thiago Silva and injured star Neymar. It remains one of the most shocking results in the tournament's history, and the cartoon had, at minimum, called the right winner a year out. 2. The injury before the injury. Before Brazil ever collapsed against Germany, they'd already lost their best player. In the quarterfinal against Colombia, a knee to the back from Juan Camilo Zuniga left Neymar with a fractured vertebra and his tournament over. Brazil survived that match, barely, but the emotional cost was enormous. Go back to the same Simpsons World Cup episode, and there's a flashy, dramatic Brazilian superstar named El Divo, talented, theatrical, and constantly accused of exaggerating contact for a foul, which sounds a lot like the criticism Neymar faced for years. In the episode, Homer has to decide whether El Divo's injury is real or a dive. A few months later, a real Brazilian superstar really was lying on real grass, and nobody was laughing about a flop this time. Fans also noticed El Divo's boots resembled a Puma design. Odd, since Neymar was a Nike athlete throughout that entire era. It looked like nothing, until 2020, when Neymar left Nike behind and signed a long-term partnership with Puma, becoming one of the brand's biggest football faces. 1. The one that's happening as you watch this. Now here's the one nobody can stop talking about. In a 1997 episode, the Simpson family watches a TV ad hyping up the single biggest soccer match imaginable, the game that will, quote, decide once and for all which nation is the greatest on earth. The two teams on the poster, Mexico and Portugal. At the time, it was an absurd pairing, a random punchline with no real-world weight behind it. Then the theory resurfaced hard during the 2022 World Cup. Mexico was in the field, Portugal was in the field, Cristiano Ronaldo was still chasing the one trophy missing from his career, and fans convinced themselves this was finally the year. It wasn't. Mexico didn't escape the group. Portugal fell in the quarterfinals. The theory looked dead, but the episode never specified a year, so the door stayed open. And 2026 reopened it wider than ever. This time Mexico isn't just a participant, they're a co-host, playing in front of a home crowd across a completely restructured 48-team tournament with 12 groups, a round of 32, and more paths to the later rounds than any World Cup in history. And Mexico's actual results have given the theory real fuel. They opened with a 2-0 win over South Africa, followed it with a 1-0 win over South Korea, then closed the group with a 3-0 win over Czechia, finishing top of Group A with all 3 wins, their best group stage performance in tournament history. That's not a hot take, that's the current standings. There's history riding on this too. From 1994 through 2018, Mexico hit the round of 16 World Cups in a row and never got past it, a stretch fans still call El Quinto Partido, the 5th match curse. Then 2022 made things worse when they didn't even survive the group. A deep run on home soil in 2026 wouldn't just be a good tournament. It would be Mexico exorcising almost 30 years of heartbreak in front of their own fans, potentially with altitude on their side at venues like Estadio Azteca, sitting above 7,300 feet, and Guadalajara, above 5,000, conditions that have historically worn down visiting teams late in matches. On the other side, Portugal's story is really one man's story. Cristiano Ronaldo, 41 years old, the all-time leading scorer in men's international football, a winner of Champions League titles, and a European championship, with the one trophy that's eluded his entire career still out of reach. Portugal's group stage wasn't a coronation. They opened with a draw against DR Congo before finding form. A reminder that this version of the El Tri versus Ronaldo dream still has to survive real football before it can survive a screenwriter's coincidence. As of right now, both Mexico and Portugal remain alive in the knockout rounds, both still on a path that could theoretically collide in the final at New Jersey's MetLife Stadium on July 19th. And here's the part that should make you a little uneasy. The cartoon version of this greatest match on Earth isn't a clean, beautiful finish. In the episode, the game itself falls apart. The crowd turns restless, tempers snap, and it ends in chaos rather than a trophy lift. If the Simpsons really are calling this one, the unsettling question isn't just who wins. It's what happens in the stands. We'll be tracking every step of the bracket. If Mexico and Portugal really do collide in that final, you'll want to have seen this video first. Which one of these actually creeped you out the most? The president in 2000, the Disney sign in 98, or a soccer poster from 1997 that might come true in the next few weeks? Drop it in the comments. And if you want the full breakdown the moment the knockout bracket sets up the Final Four, hit subscribe so you